Today on Commander Replay, Saskia the Unyielding versus Rashmi Eternity's Crafter, Uril the Miststalker, and Mogis, God of Slaughter. Welcome back to Commander Replay. Today we're playing Saskia the Unyielding, and we're playing a different version of Saskia. I was inspired by the Myriad mechanic, and I decided to build a Saskia Myriad based deck. Now, we're not running any of the actual Myriad creatures, but we are running Blade of Selves. We want to create multiple copies of creatures that have entered the battlefield effects, and find ways to sack those tokens before the end of the combat, so we can generate tons of value off of the extra ETB abilities, as well as additional value out of things like Panharmonicon and Conjurer's Closet. So let's get into the gameplay. Island for our opponent, Forest for Uril, Smoldering Marsh for Mogis. And we're going to go with the Marsh Flats, crack it, and dig out a Scrubland. The reason I'm not playing Mana Crypt here is because we don't really have a play where we can take advantage of Mana Crypt yet, and I don't want to take the life loss associated with it since we don't really have anything that we want to be doing. Also, I don't want to present myself as an early target just because I'm way ahead of everyone else, so I decide to hold back here. Rashmi plays an Island and a Sphere of the Suns, Game Trail for Uril, and a Sylvan Caryatid. So Mogis plays a Sootstoke Kindler. This is an elemental shaman that has haste and gives a target black or red creature haste until end of turn. My guess is that this is a budget option. There are many better ways in red to give creatures haste, such as Fervor and Hammer of Perforos. Oddly, those cards aren't very expensive on Magic Online, so I'm not exactly sure what the rationale was here. So Forest for us, and we'll play our Swiftfoot Boots, and pass the turn. Again, holding up on the Mana Crypt. We didn't go with Mana Crypt Panharmonicon because, again, I feel like that would just push us so far out in front, it would make us a big target for everyone else. So, Rashmi's turn. Cultivate for Rashmi. Gonna find some lands. A Tarka Monument for the Uril opponent. 3 mana, adds a red or a green, and can become a 4/4 flying dragon until end of turn. Let's see what Mogis has. Has a Shambling Remains. 4/3 can't block with Unearth. So the Shambling Remains gets in at the Uril opponent for 4 damage. So we play our Blood Crypt, and we decide to play a tap since we don't really have a play. And pass the turn. Gilded Lotus for the Rashmi opponent, followed by a Witch Stalker. Witch Stalker is a 3 mana, 3/3 with hexproof, and whenever an opponent casts a black or blue spell during your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on Witch Stalker. Good against counter magic. Uril opponent plays Where the Ancients Tread. This is a 5 mana enchantment. Whenever a creature with power 5 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, you may have Where the Ancients Tread deal 5 damage to target creature or player. Cool card. And Mogis, God of Slaughter, coming onto the battlefield. Devotion is not yet active. Shambling Remains going at the Rashmi opponent, and it hits, brings him down to 36. So our turn, we get the Mogis trigger, we're going to pay the life. Drop down our Taiga. Right here I decided to go with Saskia. Commander! I wanted to get something on the board, but I still didn't want to put down this Panharmonicon yet because we don't have anything to combo with it, and I'm afraid of it getting blown up and again just making us a huge threat to the table. I've chosen the Mogis opponent because Mogis can get pretty nasty and can really dwindle down people's life totals very quickly. So if things get crazy, I want to prioritize killing Mogis first and getting him out of the game. So we're going to swing in at Mogis, and that hits. So we get 3 in combat and then the additional 3 from dealing damage. Mogis down to 34. Mogis trigger. Opponent pays the life. No action for the Rashmi opponent. Interesting. Mogis, God of Slaughter trigger for Uril. Pays the life. So Uril coming down onto the battlefield. Uril is a 5/5 with hexproof, and he gets +2/+2 for each aura attached to it. Uril's been a very good Voltron commander for a very long time. And he gets the Where the Ancients Tread trigger. Let's see where he points it. Points it at the Sootstoke Kindler, possibly fearing giving some large creature haste. We got lucky that he decided not to blow up Saskia with the trigger. So, Ashenmoor Liege for the Mogis opponent. Other black creatures get +1/+1, other red creatures get +1/+1, and whenever Ashenmoor Liege becomes the target of spell or ability an opponent controls, that player loses 4 life. Mogis now has 7 devotion and is now an active creature, and is a 9/7 with the pump off of Ashenmoor Liege. Mogis is coming in at us, representing 9 damage, and the Shambling Remains is coming in, representing another 6. I'm not in love with it, but I decided to take the damage here. I want to keep Saskia on the battlefield. So our turn, and we get the Mogis trigger, and we're going to pay the life. No other land for us. We drop down the land. I decided to play the Conjurer's Closet first. I feel like it doesn't evoke as much fear as Panharmonicon does, even though they do roughly the same thing. So we're going to swing back at the Mogis opponent. If he wants to trade with Ashenmoor Liege, I'm fine with that, but otherwise we'll get the damage in, which would be equally as good. So opponent decides to block with the Ashenmoor Liege. I'm a little bit surprised by this play. I personally probably would have just held on to the creature and taken the damage. So Saskia down, we trade with the Ashenmoor Liege, and this makes Mogis no longer a creature. So Rashmi, Eternity's Crafter coming down for our opponent. Basically gives the first spell they play each turn Cascade. So Rashmi's going to go in at the Mogis opponent with his Witchstalker, and that hits for 3. Chandra, Torch of Defiance coming down for our opponent. Planeswalker with 4 abilities, very strong card. Opponent decides to plus Chandra, and exiles a Green Warden of Marasa. So we all take 2 damage. Gleam of Authority on Uril. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 for each +1/+1 counter on other creatures you control. Enchanted creature has Vigilance and Bolster 1. So Uril's going to hit the Rashmi opponent. Uril's sitting pretty big at 7 right now, with Vigilance. So Rashmi opponent decides to play Back to Nature, which destroys all enchantments, and is going to get their Cascade trigger. Decides not to use the Cascade. So that's going to hurt the Uril opponent most. He had the Where Ancients Tread and Gleam of Authority on the battlefield. No one else had any enchantments other than Mogis, who is indestructible. So this will set Uril back a little bit. Uril's now a 5/5. Opponent is going to play Bounding Crassus. It's a 3/3 flash. Whenever it enters the battlefield, you may tap or untap target creature. So Bounding Crassus is going to untap the Witchstalker, and opponent's going to double block the Uril. Kind of a surprising play. I didn't really see that one coming. So Uril down, and Uril takes down the Witchstalker. Opponent still has their Bounding Crassus in play. Good play by our opponent. Rakdos Guildmage for our opponent. Opponent's going to swing his Shambling Remains at the Chandra, Torch of Defiance. Chandra drops to 1 loyalty. So now it's our turn. We draw another land. It's been mostly lands for us this game. That's not been great. We're really looking for some action to play off with our Panharmonicon and our Conjurer's Closet. So we're just going to replay Saskia here. Commander! And I decided to go with the Rashmi opponent because I don't really know what they're up to. I'm worried that the Cascade could turn into some big storm kind of mess where they just combo off. So I decided to choose them. So Mogis opponent plays Unlicensed Disintegration during our turn. Destroy target creature, and if Mogis controls an artifact, it deals 3 damage to that creature's controller. So he decides to blow up the Rashmi, taking down the Storm Plan. I decided to swing in a Chandra, Torch of Defiance. I'd prefer to get that off the battlefield. So targeting Saskia with Conjurer's Closet, and we choose no. So Luxodon Warhammer for the Rashmi opponent. Quips up the Bounding Crassus, and is coming in at us. Wasn't really expecting that. We don't really have much going on right now, and there's not a ton of pressure on the board, so I decided to throw Saskia in front of this Bounding Crassus and just have them trade off. We'll take a little bit of trample damage, but I feel better about that than actually taking 6 damage. With Mogis still in play, our life total is going to dwindle pretty quickly, and we haven't found a way to gain any life back yet. So we're down to 20, and Saskia and Bounding Crassus both die. Wall of Reverence for the Uril opponent. Really good against Mogis. Especially if he gets Uril down, that'll gain a ton of life. So Mogis opponent decides to send Shambling Remains and Rakdos Guildmage at the Rashmi opponent. Dictate of Erebos for us. This makes an interesting play. First, we'll drop our land. No need to play Ancient Tomb yet. We don't want to pain ourselves if we don't have to. Life is very precious in this matchup against Mogis. So what I think we're going to do is we're just going to play Dictate during the end step of our opponent's turn. We don't have enough mana to play both Saskia and Dictate of Erebos in the same turn, so we'll just drop down this Dictate at the end of our step. People haven't really been targeting us too much yet, so I feel like by not committing to the board, they will continue to not target us and kind of fight amongst themselves. So Cold Steel Heart for our opponent. Name's Blue. Glint Nest Crane for our opponent. Look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal an artifact from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. Opponent finds a Tree of Tales. Opponent decides to equip up the Glint Nest Crane with the Luxodon Warhammer, and stays put since it has Summoning Sickness. Uril opponent decides to replay their Uril. Uril back onto the battlefield. Opponent's going to gain some life with Wall of Reverence. Goes back up to 28. So Shambling Remains going at the Rashmi opponent. That hits for 4. Mogis plays a Fumarole, targeting an island from the Rashmi opponent and the Wall of Reverence. Pay 3 life to destroy target creature and target land. Cool card. Old card. I decided to play the Dictate of Erebos right here just so we can F6 our turn, in case Mogis wants to do anything else. So, back to our turn. Mogis trigger. We're going to pay the life. I can't say the name of this card to save my life, but I love it. It's been awesome for me. Comeuppance, I believe it's pronounced. It prevents all damage that would be dealt to you and planeswalkers you control by sources you don't control. If damage from a creature's source is prevented this way, Comeuppance deals that much damage to that creature. If damage from a non-creature source is prevented that way, Comeuppance deals that much damage to the source's controller. Very cool card. So we drop down our Ancient Tomb. We check out the casting cost on Saskia. At a whopping 8 mana, I decide to finally lay down the Panharmonicon, so that way if we find something big in our next turn, we're able to cast it while having Panharmonicon on the battlefield. Hopefully this doesn't get us targeted down too much. I'm a little bit worried about that. Our only real line of defense right now is Comeuppance. Opponent sending in his Glintnest Crane at the Mogis opponent has a 4/3 flying lifelink trample. Mogis down 4, Rashmi up 4. Opponent plays Unflinching Courage on their Uril. It's going to give him +2/+2 lifelink and trample, plus the additional +2/+2 off of Uril's ability. So he's going to be real big. Real big. Let's see where he decides to point the Uril. So Uril's coming in at us. That's a 9/9 lifelink trample. We're at 16. That is a huge chunk of our life. With Mogis on the battlefield, that will make us dead very quickly. We're going to play the Comeuppance here and paint ourselves 2 off of the Ancient Tomb and say F you to Uril. F you! Because we really can't afford to lose that 9 life to Uril. Plus, this will get Uril off of the battlefield. Our opponent looks a little bit locked on lands, so it may take them some time to actually get Uril back onto the battlefield. Mogis opponent says, very nice. All the damage is redirected to Uril. Uril down. I really love this card. If any of you aren't playing with it in your white decks, you should be. I've actually swapped out Dawn Charm for this instead, and I've been really happy with the way that it plays. Pyre Zombie for our Mogis opponent. I don't think I've ever seen this card. You can pay 2 to return it from the graveyard to the hand, and pay 2 to deal 2 damage to target creature or player. Pretty cool. So Mogis trigger on us. It's going to bring us down to 12. And finally some action. So we drew Greater Good, which allows us to sacrifice a creature, draw cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power, and then discard 3 cards. We've been really creature-light this whole game. We've been drawing mostly lands, so this is going to help us find more action in our deck. So I decided to play the Mana Crypt, because I didn't want to pain myself off the cost of Ancient Tomb. Being at 12 life, we're trying to prevent any more life loss. So with Mana Crypt, we may take 3 damage, but we may not if we flip correctly. So what I decided to do right here is get Saskia into play. Saskia costs 8, and it's coming back in. Commander! I decided to choose the Uril opponent here, simply because Uril can get so big, I'm worried we may not have a direct path to victory trying to swing through Uril. Gives us some reach around a really big Uril. We'll equip the boots, and we're going to swing in at Uril just to bring his life total down a little further. So no blocks. The Uril opponent's going to take 6 from Saskia. Pretty obvious trick, but I didn't mention it earlier. Conjurer's Closet is cool just because it can help you reset which player you have selected on Saskia. Right here, we're going to leave it as is, but it is cool once we kill an opponent that we can reset who the chosen player is. So Rashmi opponent decides to play Into the Royal against Mogis. That'll get Mogis out of play. We'll slow down the life loss for the rest of us. So Rashmi opponent getting busy with the Glint Nest. That's a Glint Nest with a Luxodon Warhammer on it. It is a 4/3 flying lifelink trample. And that hits. Mogis down 4, Rashmi up 4. Wall of Blossoms for the Rashmi opponent. It's going to draw a card. Uril opponent plays a Luxodon Smiter. This looks like a just throw anything into play, get some blockers kind of play. This isn't all that threatening. Recasting Uril is probably about the worst thing that they can do to us. So Mogis opponent replays their Mogis, God of the Slaughter. And he's sending all of his creatures at the Rashmi opponent. It's representing 8 damage. Opponent's going to block the Pyre Zombie with the Wall of Blossoms. Rashmi's going to take 6, back down to 22. So back to our turn. We have Mogis trigger on the stack. We're going to lose 2 more life, drop to at least 10. And Mana Crypt. Tails never fails, baby. And we lost the flip. Tails fails. Down to 7. But we did draw an Enlightened Tutor. That will be really good for us. This can draw us into some big-time action. So the play we're going with here is Insurrection. One of the fastest ways to end a game of Commander. Untap all creatures and gain control of them until end of turn. They gain haste until end of turn. So we're going to be able to do a ton of damage here. So I decided to send half the guys at Mogis because Mogis has that continual life loss, and at 7 life, we're not going to be able to sustain that. The other half of the team is going to the Rashmi opponent, simply because the Saskia trigger will already take down the Uril opponent. So Rashmi opponent plays a Reality Shift on the Shambling Remains. This will prevent a little bit of the damage going into them, but it shouldn't alter the outcome that much. So we get a whole bunch of Saskia triggers, and that takes down both Uril and Mogis. Double kill! So now it's just us, Saskia the Unyielding versus Rashmi Eternity's Crafter. We're going head to head. Also, we gained 15 life off of the lifelink because the Loxodon Warhammer, although it's still controlled by the Rashmi opponent, the lifelink instance actually exists on the creature. So that worked out for us, put us back to 15, so we don't die to ourselves on Ancient Tomb or Mana Crypt or anything like that. The follow-up play that I wanted to make, I did want to get this Greater Good into play. I needed to play it before combat because the Sylvan Caryatid left play when the Uril opponent died. That would have allowed us to sack all of our opponent's creatures so that they wouldn't be able to get them back after the Insurrection. Unfortunately, I sequenced that wrong. Play mistake. So we're going to use Conjurer's Closet on the Wall of Blossoms to draw some extra cards. I could have chosen to reset Saskia here, but I really feel like drawing extra cards was the answer in this situation. Opponent was at 4 cards and we're at 2. Although we have the Greater Good, I am really just looking to draw into more action. We get 2 triggers off the Panharmonicon, so we get 3 visits and Harmonic Sliver. So opponents coming in with their Glintnest Crane again, and this is where gaining that extra life really helped, because we were at 7, this hits for 4, and if we lost the flip on Mana Crypt, that would kill us. So opponent hits us down to 11, they go up to 22. Opponent plays a Bio-Visionary, so it looks like they're trying to go for the Bio-Visionary combo somehow. I don't think that's going to do a whole lot for them in their current board position. So back to our turn. Mana Crypt, Tails never fails. Tails, we won the flip. So we drew a Self-Esquire, another card that I've been really loving from the new Commander product. So right now we're in a really good position. We can get down Greater Good if we want to, and we have Dictate of Erebos. We can sack creatures whenever we want and just completely wipe our opponent's board whenever we want to. So first thing we're going to do is play this Harmonic Sliver and blow up Gilded Lotus and Loxodon Warhammer. We get 2 triggers off of the Panharmonicon. Opponent plays a Torrential Gearhulk, and he's going to recast that Reality Shift, exiling another creature and manifesting again. Opponent decides to Reality Shift the manifested creature. We get another manifested creature. I think that was their way of saying that they saw the writing on the wall and that we have this game pretty well locked up. So let's drop down our Greater Good, and this is going to allow us to just control the board indefinitely. Enlightened Tutor. We search out a Skull Clamp, just another way to get more card draw. I felt like from this position, just drawing more cards is the answer. We're at 2, opponent's at 2. We have a better board state with our enchantments. He has the Torrential Gearhulk, which is pretty big, but with the Dictate of Erebos and the Greater Good out, we can wipe his board very easily. So I decided to pass the turn here, just because I didn't want to attack into that Torrential Gearhulk. I probably could have just sacked a token and then went in on the combat damage. It just felt risky to me at that exact point in time. I kind of wanted to do everything end step and then set up another big turn. So again, I'm going to go with the card draw of Conjurer's Closet, and this is going to pick up the Skull Clamp that we just searched for. We got Skull Clamp and Sidisi. Sidisi, very good with Conjurer's Closet and Panharmonicon. So opponent plays an Extraplanar Lens. It's going to double up some of their mana. Goes with Forests. Opponent's going to play Restock. Return 2 target cards from your graveyard to your hand. Exile Restock. Good card. Double Regrowth. Opponent plays a Cultivate. Lucky for us, there wasn't anything really nasty in the opponent's graveyard, so that didn't hurt us too bad. Opponent's coming in with Torrential Gearhulk. So we're just going to chump block with our Harmonic Sliver and let the Dictate of Erebos trigger take care of the rest. So Dictate of Erebos, opponent must sack a creature. Opponent sacks their Bio-Visionary. So back to our turn, Mana Crypt trigger. I went heads here and lost the flip. Again, Tails never fails. Helm of Possession. Another card that synergizes well in our deck. You may choose not to untap it, pay 2, sacrifice a creature, gain control of target creature for as long as you control Helm of Possession, and as long as Helm of Possession remains tapped. So at this point, we've got the nail in the coffin. We can use any of our effects to remove the opponent's blockers and just start getting in big damage. And we have a hand of 5 cards at this point with the ability to draw more. We're in a very good position. So as you'll see in the video, some sort of glitch happened in the replay where I was trying to cast the Sidisi, but the replay wouldn't let it go any further than that. There's some weird thing with the mistap of mana where it thought I was producing red. I think I was actually producing black mana, but it didn't register all of the black mana for some reason. You'll see in the game notes it has this illegal target 0, no source, playback finished, exiting. We used all of our tricks with Greater Good and Dictate of Erebos, and the opponent scooped a turn later. Opponent even said GG. Unfortunately, we don't get to see it here, but it is a win in the book for Saskia. Saskia the Unyielding. So why do we think we won this game? We played that big Insurrection, which was a huge play, but what are the more subtle reasons? I think one of the big reasons we were able to stay alive is that our opponents didn't perceive us to be a threat. All we really did was kept playing lands and a couple enchantments and artifacts, but nothing that really directly impacted our opponent. When Mogis is on the board, he makes everyone lose a lot of life, so it makes everyone very nervous because the longer he stays in play, the closer to dead you're going to be. Everyone was nervous about Rashmi comboing off into oblivion, and Uril, of course, just puts a huge threat on the board that is usually flying trample and can't be blocked and is so huge that you can't do anything about it. So this kept all three of our opponents fighting amongst themselves. I jumped in from time to time to kind of add some damage to whoever I felt's life total was a little bit too high. The other big play was the comeuppance play. Uril was coming in for more than half of our life total, and we were able to destroy Uril, which is generally a hard thing to do because of hexproof. But it did prevent the damage and destroy Uril, and it set the Uril opponent almost out of the game. That was the play that put them so far behind that they couldn't really recover. It is really effective to just sit back in Commander sometimes, especially if you're not getting picked on, and just keep giving off the perception that you're not a threat. So I will have a deck tech coming out soon on this deck, so you guys can see all of the card choices that I made and possibly make some suggestions of your own. But so far I've been happy with the way that this deck played. Even though it took us a really long time, we were still able to get there in the end. Let me know what you guys think of the video in the comments below, and of course, feel free to like and subscribe. This has been Commander Replay. Thank you for watching.